Hello everyone and welcome back to Tone's Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video and I hope you're all doing well. Now in today's video I'm going back to my deep dive album review series. If you've been following the channel you'll know what that is. That's where we take either a Beatles album or a Beatles solo album and give it a good old going over. We're going to talk about the album in general and we're going to talk about each track individually and score each track out of 10. At the end of that we're going to add up the score for the whole album and divide that by the number of tracks to get an average score for the album. But even when we've done that, we're still not done, because what we're going to do is we're going to plonk it into a little ranking table that I've had running for the albums that I've reviewed so far, that I call Tone's Great Big Album Ranking Review Table, where we take all the albums of the Beatles and McCartney and Lennon and Harrison and Starr solo albums and mix them all up in ranking order according to their average score. And why do we do that? Well, the reason we do that is because people are literally losing sleep because they can't decide whether Extra Texture is a better album than Ringo the Fourth. So that's why we're doing it, and it makes it a little bit exciting to see how all these albums stack up against each other. Now we haven't got very far with this ranking table yet, and here is what it looks like at the moment. And the album that I'm going to be reviewing today is Paul McCartney and Wings' Red Rose Speedway. Of course it is, because it won't have escaped your notice that Red Rose Speedway is 50 years old this month. So it seems appropriate to give Red Rose Speedway the once over at this particular time. So we'll get on with that in a minute. Before we do, I just wanted to say big warm welcome to all the new subscribers. Again, there's been quite a few of you subscribing recently. Thank you so much for that. Welcome to the channel. I hope you enjoy the content here, and of course if you want to get involved in the channel on any of the videos, feel free to tell me what you think down in the comments below the video. Tell me, you know, your opinion on the topic, or you know, anything you want to say about the video in general. Of course, if you've just joined to kind of lurk in the background, and that is the sign for lurking in the background and not say anything, because we're not all commentators, are we? If you just want to watch the videos and not comment, that's absolutely fine as well. We're just glad to have you here, so thank you once again for subscribing. So the story so far, after Wildlife had come out, Henry McCulloch joined the band. They recorded 3 singles but no album during 1972. The 3 singles being Give Ireland Back to the Irish, Mary Had a Little Lamb and Hi 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 Sea Moon. None of them did as well as you would have expected singles from Paul McCartney to do, which was disappointing. They went into the studio in March 1972 to start recording Red Rose Speedway. By January 1973, 10 months later, they were still recording overdubs on it, so it took a long time to put this album together. The original idea was that it was going to be a double album, and they recorded 21 songs during these sessions, plus Live and Let Die, although Live and Let Die was never to be considered for this album. That was obviously for the Bond film. It was never going to be on this album. They also added 2 songs left over from the Ram sessions that were recorded in 1970 at Columbia Studios in New York, Get on the Right Thing and Little Lamb, Dragonfly. So they had enough material for a double album. Now, the idea that Paul wanted is that he wanted this album to show Wings to be a band, a proper band, not just a group of backing musicians for his solo material. So amongst the songs that they recorded was a song written by Denny Laine, I Would Only Smile, also a song written by Linda McCartney, Seaside Woman. There were lots of other songs as well. There were other songs that, although Henry McCulloch didn't add any songs that he wrote himself, there were some songs in the original batch of songs that kind of were more rocky and showed off that sort of side of his guitar playing. Things like Night Out and 1882, also Best Friend as well. Obviously, those would have shown the band in a much better light. Now, the sessions were initially produced by Glyn Johns. Glyn Johns was not happy with the work that was being done. He didn't think Wings were very professional. He wasn't that impressed with Denny Laine and Henry McCulloch and Linda McCartney. Obviously, the band was fairly new and was, you know, kind of still gelling. Obviously, Linda is very newly a musician, so that is kind of understandable. But when also you consider the other bands that Glyn Johns has produced, like, well, the Beatles for a start, the Stones, the Who, the Eagles, you can kind of understand that Wings wouldn't be really up to their standards just yet. He also didn't like the fact that they spent so much time sitting around the studio smoking weed and getting stoned. And Henry McCulloch was a very heavy drinker as well, and you know, had to drink half a bottle of scotch before he could play a G chord. So he wasn't really happy with that. Denny Sywell and Denny Laine were not happy with Glyn Johns as a producer. They went to him and said, "We're not happy. You're not interested in what we're doing." And he came back and said, well, if you think that everything that you're doing is fantastic, you're sadly misguided. It's really not good stuff. Paul told Glyn Johns to treat him just like the bass player, and when he did treat him just like the bass player, Paul didn't really like it at all. So, you know, in the end, Glyn Johns walked and left Paul holding the baby. So when the album was finally finished, it was presented to EMI as a 23-track double album, and EMI were not happy with that, or weren't comfortable with it. They didn't buy in to the whole Wings as a band thing, so they didn't want tracks by Denny Laine and Linda McCartney included on the album. They wanted Paul's face on the front cover of the album, and they wanted the name of the band changed from Wings to Paul McCartney and Wings, so everybody knew that Wings was Paul McCartney's band and this was a Paul McCartney album. They also weren't happy with a double album because they didn't feel that the world was ready for a double album by a new band like Wings. They probably weren't. They also weren't comfortable with it because the 3 singles that had been released under the Wings banner had not done very well. And a final reason was that they were about to release the Red and the Blue album, and a third double album would not have been good for the sales of all 3. It would have affected the sales of all 3 because there's no way that fans could afford to buy 3 double albums in the space of a month. So it was whittled down to a much more commercial, lightweight album. A lot of the rock stuff was gone. We were left with 9 tracks including the medley, which is of course 4 shorter tracks segued together, but that's what we got as the album. So let's just talk about that and not what we could have won. Now, whenever I do these deep dive album review videos, I always like to show the actual vinyl in which I heard the album for the very first time. So here is my 1970s UK pressing of Red Rose Speedway. I would have picked this up in 1977. I don't know if you can see it, but there is the braille along the top, the message to Stevie Wonder that supposedly says, "We love you, baby." But I got a blind friend of mine to actually read what it actually says. And it says, please give the video a like and subscribe to Beatly Tones Beatles channel. Right, you'll see on the inside of these 70s albums, the booklet was actually stapled into the actual sleeve, which I think is a much better design than we've had with the reissues like the archive edition and the recent Half Speed Master, where the book is just stuffed inside the sleeve. The album comes in a plain white inner sleeve, but I notice on the other side there are the musings of a very young teenage Beatley Tone, where I would have been laying on my bed listening to this album and just writing all this random nonsense on the inner sleeve. So it says Paul McCartney discography, and I've written like all the albums down the side, and I know that I bought this in 1977 because it goes up to Wings Over America there only, and then I've got all the singles there, and I've even like put the lineups for each album. So McCartney and Ram, P and L, Paul and Linda, and then we get to Wildlife and 1972 and P, L, D, L and D, S. What an absolute geek. Down this side I've got, it says Wings Are, and then in brackets, and have been, and then a list of all the members of Wings up to this point, and a couple of attempts to draw the Wings logo, both the new logo and the old logo, which just goes to prove that, you know, even then I was a bit of a knob. Let's have a look at the vinyl, and as we discussed before, you know, it says on the label Paul McCartney and Wings rather than just Wings. And this vinyl's in pretty good shape, really, seeing how old it is and the crap equipment that I used to play it on. But the Paul McCartney and Wings thing, interestingly, doesn't stretch to the spine where it just says Wings, Red Rose Speedway. And of course, at the back where you've got the address for the Wings Fun Club, that says just Wings as well. Okay, right, I know that this video, we're already about 10 minutes in and we haven't even started talking about the songs yet. So let's do that right now. So the album kicks off with Big Barn Bed, which to me is a very much an undervalued song in the context of Paul's whole discography. I don't think it gets the credit that it deserves. It's a great opener to this album, full of hooks and fantastic harmonies by Denny Laine and Linda that give it that sort of authentic Wings sound. Denny Sywell's drumming is fantastic on this song. He's doing some complicated drum patterns with the kick drum, some great fills in this, and generally his drums lock in brilliantly with Paul's bass playing, which is kind of back to its melodic best. Now the actual song, the lyrics are fairly weak on this track. The song appears to be about sleeping in a bed, and you've got to kind of question what the thought process was when Paul decided to write this song. I know I'm going to write a song about sleeping in a bed. It doesn't sound that exciting as a subject matter, but we know this song kind of harks back to at least 1970 because we hear the sort of the beginnings of it at the end of Ram On. Who's that coming round the corner? Who's that coming round the bend? As I say, the lyrics are a little bit weak. The sort of, who are you going to weep on? Who are you going to sleep on? Who are you going to creep on next? Weeping on a willow, sleeping on a pillow, leaping armadillo. Yeah, they're not great, the lyrics, but that for me doesn't detract away from the song. I like this song a lot, and I love the way that it builds and builds and builds as it gets towards the end of the song. And by the end of the song, like even Henry is joining in on the backing vocals as they're getting more and more fuller. And what you hear is this sort of jangling piano at the fore of the song. So for me, this is a great song musically, not a great song lyrically, but I'm still going to give it 9 out of 10 because I love it. So track 2 is My Love, the big hit single from the album. It was a #1 single in the US, #2 in Canada, #5 in Australia, and #9 in the UK, but big hit all over the world. Won a gold disc for sales of that single, and probably helped the album become a #1 album in America, a #5 album in the UK, probably very much on the strength of the success of this single. Now it's a great ballad, a very melodic ballad, obviously a song for Linda. She's doing really well, our Lynn. They've only been married 5 minutes. She's already inspired 2 great songs in Maybe I'm Amazed and My Love. So it's very strong melodically, not complicated song, 3 verses, a middle 8 and a solo. Really love the middle 8. The My Love Holds the Other Key. To me, the way that Paul varies that the melody on that part of the song is great, gives it some good variation. And that guitar solo, that 28-second guitar solo from Henry McCulloch that everybody can sing note for note. And you know, if you ever hear anyone playing that solo differently to how it is on that record, you just say, he's playing that wrong, because there is only one way to play that solo, and that is the way that Henry McCulloch plays it on the album. The song was recorded live with an orchestra, with overdubs done later, but no overdubs on that guitar solo. That stayed exactly as it was. People complain a little bit about the lyric with the whoa whoa whoas. My Love does it good, but when you think about it, those whoa whoas are the kind of the hook of the song. They're the thing that's most accessible, the thing that everyone can hum, everyone can sing. So they're very much part of the reason this was such a big hit. As I say, Paul sings it brilliantly. It's a great ballad, and I'm giving it 9.5 out of 10. So track 3 is Get On The Right Thing, and this song is pretty much about as rock as this album gets. This is the most upbeat song on the album, and it comes from the Ram sessions, recorded in New York in 1970. So it features Dave Spinoza on lead guitar. There's no Denny Laine and no Henry McCulloch on this track at all. Backing vocals from Linda, absolutely fantastic. Some fantastic drumming as well from Denny Sywell, some great fills on this. But the highlight of this song is Paul's vocal, where he is reaching some seriously high register notes in this song. The vocal has got a very live feel to it. There's tons of reverb on his voice on this song, but his singing is absolutely fantastic. It's a fun song. It's not really a serious song. There's this bit in the lyric, all at once you get love on your mind and your world is as kind as a penny. Never really quite sure how kind a penny is, but it doesn't really matter. As I say, this is a fun song. And a fun fact about this song is if you listen really carefully at about 3 minutes, you'll hear Paul shout out, "Oh, my plug's come out," and he's talking about his headphones. But I say, I do enjoy this song. It's nothing special, but I do enjoy it, and I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. So song 4 is One More Kiss, which on the face of it is a very simplistic song, yet we're told it took 85 takes to get it right, which seems a little bit excessive. It's probably it's one of those songs, one of these twee McCartney songs, and probably just about as twee as Paul ever got. But there's nothing to dislike about this song. I say it's very simplistic, got a really good melody, again simplistic lyrics, plenty of reverb on Paul's vocals, which is great. It's kind of got that loose feel because it's got the counting at the beginning. Henry McCulloch plays some great guitar on this. That little guitar solo intro, so good he played it twice. But what I really like about his guitar playing on this song is that like call and response guitar lines that he plays sort of from about halfway through the song. Denny Laine's on bass on this, playing the root notes. But as I say, there's nothing unpleasant about this, yet at the same time it doesn't pull up any trees either. So I'm going to give this a quite generous 7.5 out of 10. So we've reached the end of side 1, and the final track on side 1 is Little Lamb, Dragonfly. For me, the best song on the album. Clocks in at just over 6 minutes and is utterly superb from start to finish. Now on this song, Paul employs a little trick that he's done many times in his career, where he's taken 2 bits of songs, 2 unfinished songs, and segued them together. and you don't even see the join. Now the first part of the song, the little lamb part, kind of oozes sadness. It's about a lamb that died on his farm, and the lyrics are kind of he's talking to the lamb as if he's Dr. Dolittle with a guitar. The second part of the song, the Dragonfly part, was mooted for the Rupert movie soundtrack, and and they fit together perfectly. The song was mostly recorded during the Ram sessions. It was left over from the Ram sessions. So Hugh McCracken is playing lead guitar and 12-string acoustic guitar. They did do some overdubs at Trident in London, and Denny Lane adds some backing vocals to this. But there's no Henry McCulloch on this song. The song has even got sleigh bells going throughout, which I hadn't heard before until I heard it on the Half Speed Master. I haven't gone back to listen to older versions of the album since getting that to see whether I can hear them on those albums now that I know that they're there, or whether they're buried in the mix. But you can definitely hear them throughout the song on the Half Speed Master. Now the song was fully orchestrated during the Ram sessions by George Martin, for which he gets a production credit for this song. And just everything about this song kind of oozes class. The guitar playing, the bass playing, the vocals, the harmonies. The harmonies are just really, really lush and just really well done. And I would be cheating both the song and myself if I didn't give it 10 out of 10, because this is the epitome of what classic McCartney means. So side 2 opens with the much maligned single Pigeon. Now, I've heard lots of other reviewers giving this song short shrift, but I'm sorry, I absolutely love it. I love everything about this song, right down to the very basic minimalistic arrangement, which for most part of the song is just Paul sitting at the piano. But the piano, it sounds so crisp and so clean and uninterfered with from other instrumentation. And Paul sings the lyrics in a very heartfelt way. But the thing that I love most about this song is the story behind it, as told by Paul in his lyrics book, where he says he was looking out the window, he sees a pigeon pecking around on its own, and he wonders why it's on its own. So he concocts this story about why it's on its own. And what he decided in this story was that the pigeon was on its own because it had fallen out with Mrs. Pigeon. Did she throw you out in the cold morning rain again? And then later in the song there's a seagull, and he's on his own, and the same thing has happened to him and the seagull and the pigeon, and they meet up and they talk to each other, and one says to the other, do you need a pal for a minute or two? You do? Well, me too. And I just absolutely love that. I love that story. And if you've ever been in a band, you'll kind of recognise the part of the evening when you're rehearsing where everyone jumps on each other's instruments, and that seems to be what happened in the session for Single Pigeon, because we've got Denny Lane playing drums, and we've got Denny Sywell playing bass. Which is very unusual. And the horn part at the end, did they play that on a synthesizer? No. Did they get in a horn section? No. You've got Paul playing trombone, Denny Lane playing saxophone, and Denny Sywell playing cornet. I mean, what is not to love about this song? If you don't love this song, you don't love life. And I'm giving this one 8 out of 10. So track 2, side 2 is When the Night, and this for me is a little bit like One More Kiss, where it's, there's nothing to really dislike about this track, but on the other hand, it doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't pull up any trees. It's just fairly flat all the way through. It's kind of it's got quite an unusual sort of time signature. And it's got that sort of a little bit of a 50s feel, not in a kind of a doo-wop sense, but in the fact that it's got a call and response lead vocal and backing vocal type thing going on. The best part of the song for me is towards the end of the song, where Paul slips into his sort of "Oh Darling, Monkberry Moon Delight" sort of style of vocal, that hoarse vocal, which I really love. But apart from that, the song hasn't got too much to recommend about it. So I'm going to give this one 7.5 out of 10. So the next track, Loop, First Indian on the Moon, is an instrumental. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, then you probably know that I'm not a big fan of instrumentals. However, I do really like this one. And the reason that I like it is because it keeps moving, it keeps changing, it's different all the way through. There's lots of different phases going on. The instrumentation, absolutely fantastic. Paul's bass playing is outstanding. The drums are really good as well. And there's all these little bits of lead guitar going off here, there and everywhere, which is fantastic as well. You've also got all the sound effects going on in the background as well. Probably the best way to listen to this track is through headphones to hear everything that's going on, because there is a lot going on. But the main thing is it keeps moving, it keeps changing. The sort of the chanting bit in it harks a little bit back to another song that Paul did about Indians, and that was Creen Akore from the first McCartney album. But generally, I think this song is really influenced by Pink Floyd, who just happened to be in the next studio at Abbey Road recording Dark Side of the Moon, while Wings were in another studio recording something for Red Rose Speedway. So maybe a bit of a Pink Floyd influence. In fact, the spoken parts in Dark Side of the Moon that you hear in between the tracks, well, Paul and Linda were asked to go into Floyd's studio and do some talking bits for that, where they were just supposed to go and sit on a stool and just come out with something random. Their part wasn't actually used in the end because it was felt that it wasn't spontaneous enough. But that Irish voice that you hear in between Money and Us and Them, which says, I don't really know, I was really drunk at the time, that is Henry McCulloch. So fun fact about Dark Side of the Moon. But generally, Loop is a track that I really like. I'm not sure that it really fits on the sweetness of the rest of this album, but maybe because it is so different from everything else that's on the album, it gives you a nice little interlude in the middle of side 2, which I like. So for Loop, I am going to give it 8 out of 10. So we've arrived at the final track, which I'm going to treat as one track as far as the scoring goes, but of course it is 4 sort of fragments of songs segued together, clocking in at just over 11 minutes. And for me, this is not a great way to end this album. It's certainly no Abbey Road medley, that's for sure. And when Paul was doing his promotional work for Memory Almost Full and talking about the medley on that album, he said it was the first time he'd done a medley since Abbey Road. So he'd completely forgotten about the Red Rose Speedway medley, and I think that's because it's pretty forgettable, largely. So it starts off with Hold Me Tight, which is a decent enough, piano-led song. It kind of changes pace when it gets to verse 2 and the drums come in. There are nice vocal harmonies in this song, but that's about it. Very repetitive lyrics. The piano kind of descends into Lazy Dynamite, the second song on this album, and again, very repetitive lyrics in that song. It's got quite a nice guitar solo, but a very unsatisfactory segue into the next song, Hands of Love, where it's just Paul doing the kazoo thing, but doing it vocally, which is not really a great segue. Hands of Love feels a little bit like a throwaway, maybe not even a B-side. Paul and Linda singing together the lead vocal on that one. And the segue into the 4th track, Power Cut, isn't even a segue. Hands of Love just fades out and Power Cut just fades in. the thing that really drives me nuts about Power Cut is the B, I love you so. Maybe I love you so. B, I love you so. B, I love you so. Drives me nuts. Again, really, really repetitive. And we get that sort of the Abbey Road reprise thing where it goes through, you know, instrumentally at the end of Power Cut. It goes through instrumentally the other songs that are in the medley, which is probably the cleverest thing about this medley. But I just don't think this is a great way to end the album. When you talk about the double album, as I said at the top of the video, there was 3 iterations of that double album with various tracks taken out and mixed up or whatever, but there was never any question that this medley was going to be part of the album. It was never one that was a track that was dropped out in any of those iterations. And I think that the last 11-12 minutes of this album could have been served better with some of the other songs that were planned for that double album. So for the medley, I'm just going to give that 6.5 out of 10. So my overall thoughts on Red Rose Speedway is that it's a little step up from Wildlife, which is an album that I like a lot, but I think Wildlife is more about the feel of that album, whereas this album is full of really strong melodic songs, less experimental than Wildlife, less experimental than Ram or McCartney. It's a far more constructed album, but lyrically it's quite poor on a number of the songs. I think Wings are still learning their trade as a band, learning to be a band, and they would go on to make much better albums than this. I think that there's not really enough rock music on this album, and it could have been different. And when we come to do a deep dive of what would have been the double album, the album that we call now Red Rose Speedway Reconstructed, we'll talk about that then, but not now. So overall, it's a decent album, but like I say, Wings would go on to make much better albums than this. So the final score for the album was 74. There are 9 tracks on the album, which gives it an average score of 8.22. So we're going to bung that into Beatly Tone's great big album review ranking table, and it's coming in at 4th place, so it's just below Let It Be and above Living in the Material World, which I think is probably about right, because out of those 2 albums from 1973, I think I am reaching for Red Rose Speedway before I'm reaching for Living in the Material World. Okay, well, that is pretty much it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching. If you want to watch the other videos that I've made in this deep dive series, there's going to be an end card coming up in a minute at the end of this video, so you can go and watch all the other episodes if you want to. Okay, so thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all very soon. Bye bye.